My name is Maddie. I am 68 years old, and I never imagined my own son would try to kill me. I am a widow. My husband Gerald passed away 5 years ago, leaving me our home and enough savings to live comfortably. I raised my son Brandon alone after that, giving him everything I could. Lately, Brandon had been struggling. He failed in business, owed money to dangerous people, and his attitude toward me changed. One night, I felt a terrible pain in my chest. I called for Brandon to help me. I begged him to call 911. But instead of calling for help, he took my phone, walked out of my bedroom, and locked the door from the outside. Before I tell you what happened during those 3 terrible days, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please drop your city in the comments below. If you have ever felt betrayed by someone you loved and trusted completely, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. You will want to hear how I survived what came next, and what my son saw when he finally opened that door 3 days later. I was born and raised in a small town in Texas. Life was simple back then. I married Gerald when I was 23 years old. He was a good man, steady and hardworking. He became a civil engineer building roads and bridges across Oregon. We moved to Portland for his job when I was 25. A year later, I gave birth to Brandon. He was our only child. Gerald wanted more kids, but after a complicated delivery, the doctor said it would be risky. So Brandon became the center of our world. I worked as an elementary school teacher for 32 years. I loved my students. Every September, I welcomed a new group of bright-eyed children into my classroom. I taught them to read, to write, to be kind. Gerald worked long hours, but he always came home to us. We saved money carefully. We bought a 3-story house in a quiet neighborhood in the suburbs of Portland. The house had a big backyard, tall oak trees, and a porch where Gerald and I would sit in the evenings drinking iced tea and talking about our dreams. Brandon grew up in that house. He had his own room on the 2nd floor painted blue with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. He was a quiet child, not particularly outgoing, but not troubled either. He did average work in school. He played soccer for a few years but quit when he turned 14. He preferred staying in his room playing video games, reading comic books. Gerald and I did not push him too hard. We thought he would find his path eventually. When Brandon turned 18, he went to the University of Oregon. We paid for everything. Tuition, books, a used car, rent for a small apartment near campus. He studied marketing. His grades were mediocre, mostly C's and a few B's. He graduated after 5 years instead of 4 because he failed a few classes and had to retake them. Gerald and I did not scold him. We just encouraged him to keep trying. After college, Brandon moved back home. He said he needed time to figure out what he wanted to do. He got a job at a marketing firm in downtown Portland, but he quit after 8 months. He said his boss was unreasonable. Then he worked at another company selling insurance. He quit that job too after 6 months. He said the work was boring. Over the next 15 years, Brandon jumped from job to job. He never stayed anywhere longer than a year. When Brandon was 39, he married a woman named Diane. She was nice enough, worked as a dental hygienist. They had a small wedding at a hotel. Gerald and I paid for most of it. Diane seemed to care about Brandon, but I could tell she was frustrated with him. He still did not have a stable job. He borrowed money from us frequently, always promising to pay it back. He never did. 3 years into their marriage, Diane filed for divorce. She told me privately that she could not handle Brandon's lack of ambition and his constant excuses. There were no children, which was perhaps a blessing. The divorce was finalized quickly. Brandon moved back home with us. He was 40 years old. Gerald was already sick by then. Lung cancer. He had smoked for 20 years when he was younger, and it finally caught up with him. He fought hard for 18 months, but the cancer won. Gerald died on a cold morning in February 5 years ago. I held his hand as he took his last breath. Brandon was in the room too, but he did not cry. He just stood there staring at the floor. After Gerald passed, I was alone with Brandon. I did not mind at first. I thought it would be nice to have my son close by. I cooked his favorite meals. I washed his clothes. I tried to help him find jobs, printing out applications, driving him to interviews. But Brandon seemed to sink deeper into himself. He spent most of his time in his room or out at bars. He drank more than he used to. He came home late, smelling of whiskey and cigarettes. Gerald had left us in good financial shape. The house was worth about $850,000. There was $320,000 in savings. I also had my teacher's pension, which paid me $2,800 every month. I did not need much. I lived simply. I paid the bills, bought groceries, kept the house maintained. I assumed Brandon would eventually get his life together and move out. But he never did. Then 6 months ago, everything started to change. Brandon came to me one afternoon with a folder full of papers. He said he wanted to start his own business. He wanted to open a bar in downtown Portland. He said it was his dream, his chance to finally make something of himself. He needed $50,000 to get started. He promised he would pay me back within 2 years with interest. I hesitated. $50,000 was a lot of money. But he was my son. I wanted to believe in him. I wanted to support him. So I withdrew the money from my savings account and gave it to him. Brandon hugged me, told me I would not regret it, told me he would make me proud. For the first few months, things seemed to be going well. Brandon was busy. He rented a space, hired a contractor, bought equipment. He named the bar the Tap House. It opened in July. I went to the opening night. The place was packed with people, music playing, laughter everywhere. I felt hopeful. Maybe this was it. Maybe Brandon would finally succeed. But by October, the bar was struggling. Brandon did not know how to manage money. He overspent on decorations, on expensive liquor, on staff he did not need. Customers stopped coming after the initial excitement wore off. By November, Brandon closed the Tap House. He lost everything. Worse, he told me he had borrowed an additional $30,000 from a private lender, someone with connections to dangerous people. He could not pay them back. I was devastated. That was $80,000 gone. I tried to stay calm. I told Brandon we would figure it out together. But his behavior changed after that. He became short-tempered, snapping at me over small things. He stopped helping around the house. He would disappear for days without telling me where he was going. When he was home, he stayed in his room or sat in the living room drinking beer and staring at the television. Then he started asking strange questions. One evening while I was making dinner, he leaned against the kitchen counter and said, "Mom, do you have your will updated?" I looked at him surprised. "Why are you asking that?" He shrugged. "Just wondering. You are not getting any younger. You should make sure everything is in order." I did not like the tone of his voice, but I answered honestly, "Yes, I updated it after your father died. Everything goes to you." Brandon nodded slowly. "Good. That is good." Then he walked away. A few days later, he asked again, this time more directly, "What happens to the house if something happens to you?" I frowned. "Brandon, why do you keep asking about this?" He held up his hands. "I am just being practical, Mom. These are important things to think about." But the way he looked at me made me uneasy. I have a heart condition. Nothing too serious, but I have to take medication every day. 2 pills in the morning, atorvastatin for cholesterol and metoprolol for my blood pressure. I keep them in the medicine cabinet in my bathroom. One afternoon, I walked into my bedroom and found Brandon standing in front of the open cabinet holding one of my pill bottles. "Brandon, what are you doing?" He turned quickly, startled. "Oh, I was just looking for some aspirin. I have a headache." I pointed to the cabinet in the hallway. "The aspirin is out there, not in my bathroom." He put the bottle down and left without another word. I should have paid more attention to the signs. I should have asked more questions. But I did not want to believe my son was capable of anything terrible. He was still my boy, the child I had raised, the baby I had rocked to sleep so many nights. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday evening in late November. The weather outside was cold and damp, typical for Portland in autumn. I had gone to bed around 9:30, tired from a long day. I had spent the afternoon volunteering at the local library, shelving books and helping patrons. My legs ached. My back was sore. I changed into my nightgown, took my pills, and climbed into bed. I picked up a novel I had been reading, something light and easy. Around 10 o'clock, I felt a strange tightness in my chest. At first, I thought it was just indigestion. I had eaten spaghetti for dinner, and sometimes tomato sauce bothered my stomach. But the tightness grew worse. It spread across my chest, squeezing like a vice. My left arm started to tingle. I could not catch my breath. Panic set in. I recognized the symptoms. This was not indigestion. This was my heart. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, but my hand was shaking so badly I knocked it onto the floor. I tried to get out of bed to pick it up, but the pain was too much. I fell back against the pillows, gasping. "Brandon." I called out, my voice weak. "Brandon, I need help." I heard footsteps running up the stairs. The door to my bedroom burst open. Brandon stood there, his face flushed, his eyes wide. He looked at me lying there, clutching my chest, struggling to breathe. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then I managed to speak. "Call 911, please. I think I'm having a heart attack." Brandon did not move. He just stared at me. I saw something in his eyes, something cold and calculating. "Brandon, please," I begged. "I need you to call for help right now." He blinked, then walked slowly to my nightstand. He picked up my phone from the floor. I thought he was going to call for help, but instead he looked at the screen, then slipped the phone into his pocket. "Brandon, what are you doing?" My voice was barely a whisper. He did not answer. He just stood there for a few more seconds, looking at me with an expression I could not read. Then he turned and walked toward the door. "Brandon, please." I tried to shout, but it came out as a choked sob. He stepped out into the hallway. I heard the door close. Then I heard the sound that made my blood run cold, the metallic click of the lock turning from the outside. Our bedroom doors are old-fashioned, installed when the house was built in the 1970s. They have locks that can be turned with a key from the outside. Gerald and I never used them. We never thought we would need to. But now my son had just locked me inside my own bedroom. "Brandon," I called again. "Brandon, what are you doing? Let me out." There was no response. I heard his footsteps going down the stairs, heavy and deliberate. Then I heard the front door open and close. A moment later, I heard his car engine start. He was leaving. I sat on the floor with my back against the locked door, trying to understand what had just happened. The pain in my chest was still there, but it was starting to ease slightly. I focused on my breathing, taking slow, deep breaths, like the doctor had taught me. In through my nose, out through my mouth. Gradually, the tightness began to loosen. The tingling in my arm faded. I realized with a strange mixture of relief and terror that this might not have been a full heart attack after all. Perhaps it was angina, a warning sign, a painful spasm. But it was serious enough that I needed medical attention, and my son had just taken my phone and locked me in. I tried to make sense of it. Why would he do this? Where was he going? Maybe he panicked. Maybe he did not know how to handle the situation. Maybe he went to get help. Yes, that had to be it. He was driving me to the hospital himself. He would come back any minute, unlock the door, and take me to the emergency room. I clung to that hope for about 10 minutes, sitting there in my nightgown, shivering despite the warm air from the heater. But 10 minutes turned to 20. 20 turned to 30. No sound of a car returning. No footsteps on the stairs. Nothing. The house was completely silent, except for the ticking of the old clock in the hallway downstairs. I tried to stand up using the door handle for support. My legs felt weak, but I managed to get to my feet. I looked around my bedroom, assessing the situation with as much clarity as I could manage. The room was large, maybe 15 feet by 18 feet. The walls were painted a soft cream color. There was my queen-sized bed against the far wall, covered with a floral quilt my mother had made years ago. On one side of the room was a tall oak dresser with a mirror. On the other side was my closet, still full of clothes I rarely wore anymore. Near the window was a small armchair where I liked to sit and read in the afternoons when the sunlight came through. The window. I walked over to it, hope rising in my chest. Maybe I could open it, call for help, signal to a neighbor. I pulled back the curtains. The window overlooked the backyard. It was dark outside the yard, illuminated only by a single floodlight attached to the garage. Beyond the yard was a tall wooden fence, and beyond that, trees. Our nearest neighbors, the Watsons, lived about 100 feet to the right. Their house was just visible through the branches. I could see lights on in their windows. To the left, farther away, was the house of Mr. Gregory Foster, an elderly man who kept to himself. I tried to open the window. I grabbed the bottom edge and pulled upward. It did not budge. I pulled harder, putting all my weight into it. The window was stuck sealed shut by years of paint and moisture. I had not opened this window in at least a decade. I tried again, straining, but it would not move. Frustrated, I looked around for something to break the glass. But what would that accomplish? Even if I broke the window, I was on the second floor. The drop to the ground was at least 15 feet. At my age, with my health problems, I could not risk jumping. I might break a leg or worse. I turned my attention to the door. I examined the lock. It was an old brass mechanism, simple but effective. The keyhole was on the outside. There was no way to unlock it from inside without the key, and I had no idea where that key was. Probably in a drawer somewhere downstairs, forgotten for decades. I tried pushing against the door with my shoulder, but it was solid wood, heavy and unyielding. I was trapped. I looked around the room again, taking inventory of what I had. The furniture, my clothes, the bed, a bookshelf with a few paperback novels and old photo albums. On my nightstand there was a lamp, a box of tissues, a glass of water, and the book I had been reading. No phone, no laptop, no way to communicate with the outside world. Wait. The bathroom. I walked to the small bathroom attached to my bedroom. It was just a toilet, a sink, and a shower stall. I opened the medicine cabinet above the sink. There were a few bottles of lotion, some bandages, a tube of toothpaste, and my pill bottles. But both bottles were nearly empty. I had been meaning to refill my prescriptions, but had not gotten around to it yet. There were maybe 2 or 3 pills left in each bottle, not enough for more than a day or two. I closed the cabinet and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked terrible. My face was pale, almost gray. My hair, usually neatly combed, was a mess. My eyes were red and puffy. I looked like a frightened old woman, which I supposed I was. I splashed some cold water on my face, trying to clear my head, trying to think rationally. What could I do? I could scream. I could bang on the walls. Maybe someone would hear me. But it was late, nearly 11 o'clock at night now. The Watsons were probably asleep. Mr. Foster was hard of hearing. And even if someone did hear me, would they understand? Would they know I was in danger? Or would they just think it was a television or some other noise? I walked back to the window and tried once more to open it. I pushed and pulled, grunting with effort. Finally, after several attempts, I felt it give just a little. I kept pushing, and slowly, painfully, the window slid upward about 6 inches. Cold air rushed in, making me shiver. It was not much, but it was something. I leaned toward the opening and shouted into the night, "Help someone, help me!" My voice sounded weak and thin in the vast darkness. I shouted again, "Please, I need help." But there was no response, just the sound of wind rustling through the trees and the distant hum of traffic on the highway a mile away. I pulled the armchair over to the window and sat down, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. I was exhausted physically and emotionally. The pain in my chest had subsided to a dull ache, but I felt weak and dizzy. I had not eaten anything since lunch hours ago. I thought about food, about the leftover chicken in the refrigerator downstairs, the bread in the pantry, the apples in the fruit bowl. My stomach growled. But there was nothing I could do about it now. I sat there for a long time, staring out the window, waiting for some sign of life, some indication that help was coming. But the night remained still and silent. Eventually, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart leaped. Brandon was back. I stood up quickly, almost stumbling. I listened to the sound of the front door opening, closing. Footsteps in the hallway below. Then footsteps on the stairs, slow and deliberate. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I could sense him standing there, just on the other side. "Brandon," I said, my voice shaking. "Brandon, are you there?" Silence. Then finally, his voice muffled through the wood. "Mom." Just that one word. Nothing more. "Brandon, please let me out," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I need my medicine. I need to see a doctor. Please, son." There was a pause. Then he spoke again, and his words chilled me to the bone. "Mom, I am not calling anyone. Just rest." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Brandon, I need food. I need water. I need my medication." I said louder now, desperation creeping into my tone. "You will be fine," he said. And then I heard his footsteps walking away down the hall into his own room. The door to his room closed. I stood there stunned. He was not going to help me. He was not going to let me out. He was going to leave me here. And in that terrible moment, the truth hit me like a physical blow. My son was not panicking. He was not confused. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted me to die. He wanted his inheritance, and he was willing to wait for it. I barely slept that night. I lay on my bed fully clothed now because the room was getting colder with the window cracked open. I pulled 2 blankets over myself, but I still shivered. My mind raced with fear and anger and disbelief. How had it come to this? How had my sweet little boy turned into someone capable of such cruelty? I thought about all the years I had devoted to him, all the sacrifices Gerald and I had made. And this was how he repaid me. When morning finally came, gray light filtering through the window, I felt worse than I had the night before. My head throbbed. My mouth was dry. I got up slowly and I went to the bathroom. I drank water straight from the tap, cupping my hands and gulping it down. It helped a little, but I was so hungry. My stomach cramped with emptiness. I opened the medicine cabinet and took one of my remaining pills, swallowing it with more tap water. That left me with only 1 or 2 doses left. I spent the morning trying to figure out a way to escape. I examined every inch of the room. I looked under the bed, hoping to find something useful. There was nothing but dust and an old slipper. I went through the drawers of my dresser, looking for anything that might help. Clothes, scarves, a few pieces of old jewelry. Nothing. I checked the bookshelf. Just books and photo albums. I flipped through one of the albums, looking at pictures of Brandon as a child. His toothy smile at age 7. His awkward pose in a school picture at age 12. Gerald and me at his high school graduation, all of us smiling. The images felt like they were from another lifetime. I put the album away and returned to the problem of the door. I studied the hinges. They were on the inside, which was good. If I could remove the hinge pins, I could take the door off. But I had nothing to use as a tool. No screwdriver, no knife, nothing metal and thin enough to wedge under the pins. I tried using a wire hanger from my closet, bending it and pushing it against the pin, but it just bent and slipped. I gave up after half an hour of trying. By noon, I was feeling dizzy and weak. I needed food. I needed my medication. I went back to the window and looked outside. It was a Saturday. I remembered that because I had planned to go grocery shopping this weekend. The Watsons' car was in their driveway. They were home. I waited, hoping to see someone outside. Around 1 o'clock, I saw Helen Watson come out of her front door with her 2 young children. They were laughing, the kids running ahead toward the car. Helen followed, carrying a bag. I leaned as close to the window as I could and shouted, "Helen, Helen, help me!" But she was too far away, and the children were making noise. She did not hear me. I watched helplessly as she loaded the kids into the car, got in herself, and drove away. I wanted to cry, but I forced myself to stay calm. I would try again later. The afternoon dragged on. I sat in the armchair, conserving my energy. I thought about Brandon downstairs. What was he doing? Was he eating? Watching television? Did he feel any guilt at all? Or was he just waiting, counting the hours until I was too weak to survive? Around 5 o'clock in the evening, I heard sounds from below. The television turned on. I could hear the muffled voices of a news broadcast. Then I heard footsteps in the kitchen, the sound of the refrigerator opening and closing, the microwave beeping. Brandon was making himself dinner. The smell of food drifted up through the vents, making my stomach twist with hunger. I could not take it anymore. I went to the door and pounded on it with both fists. "Brandon!" I shouted. "You cannot do this. This is murder. Do you understand that you are killing your own mother?" I kept pounding, kept shouting until my hands hurt and my voice was hoarse. Finally, I heard footsteps on the stairs. They came closer, stopped just outside my door. "Brandon, please," I said, my voice breaking. I am begging you. I gave you everything. I loved you. How can you do this to me?" There was silence. Then his voice came through the door, and it was cold and bitter. "You gave me everything. You gave me a life of being average mom. You and Dad never pushed me. You never expected anything from me. You just let me coast. And now look at me. I am 42 years old, broke, living with my mother. Dad left you all this money and I deserve it. I have debts. I need that money now, not 10 years from now when you finally die of old age." His words cut through me like knives. "You can have the money," I said desperately. "I will give you everything. Just let me out. We can go to the bank on Monday. I will transfer it all to you." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "If I let you out, you will call the police. I know you, Mom. You always do the right thing. You always follow the rules. Well, I am done following rules. I am done waiting." "Brandon, I am sick," I said, my voice shaking. "I need medicine. Please." There was a pause. Then he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "Then you should have taken better care of your health." I could not believe what I was hearing. This was not my son. This was a stranger. "You are going to regret this," I said, anger rising in my chest. "You will not get away with it." He said nothing. I heard his footsteps walking away back downstairs. I sank to the floor, my back against the door, and finally let myself cry. I cried for the son I had lost, for the man he had become, for the life I had lived, and the way it was ending. But after a while the tears stopped, and in their place came something else, anger. A fierce, burning anger. I was not going to die in this room. I was not going to let Brandon win. I would find a way out. I had to. I stood up, wiping my eyes. I went back to the dresser and opened the bottom drawer. I pulled out old sweaters and scarves, digging all the way to the back. And then my hand touched something hard and flat. I pulled it out. It was my old iPad, the one I had bought years ago to read books. I had not used it in months, maybe longer. I pressed the power button, not expecting anything. But the screen lit up. The battery icon showed 15%. It was still charged. My hands shook as I unlocked it. The Wi-Fi was still connected. I opened the email app. My heart pounded as I started typing. I sent an email to my lawyer, Lawrence Carter. The subject line read, "Urgent. Help needed." In the body I wrote, "I am locked in my bedroom by my son Brandon. He took my phone. I need help. Please call the police. Address 412 Maple Grove Lane, Portland, Oregon. Please hurry." I hit send. Then I opened a new email and sent the same message to my best friend, Dorothy Palmer. Dorothy and I had been friends for 20 years. She would know this was not a joke. She would help. I sent the email and then sat there staring at the screen, praying that someone would see these messages soon. The battery was at 8% now. I turned off the iPad to save power. All I could do now was wait. The third day was the worst. I woke up on Sunday morning feeling weaker than I had ever felt in my life. I had not eaten in 3 days. I had only water. My head was spinning, my vision blurry. I could barely stand. I crawled to the bathroom and drank more water from the tap, but it did not help much. I took my last pill. That was it. No more medication. If I did not get help soon, I was not sure I would survive much longer. I managed to pull myself back to the armchair by the window. I sat there wrapped in blankets, watching the world outside. It was a sunny day, bright and cold. I saw birds flying past. I saw cars driving down the street. Normal life continuing while I was trapped in this room, slowly dying. I thought about Gerald. I wondered what he would think if he could see me now. I wondered if he was waiting for me somewhere on the other side. I was not a deeply religious person, but I found myself praying. Praying that someone had seen my emails. Praying that help was coming. Around mid-morning, I heard a sound that made my heart leap. A car pulling up outside. I struggled to my feet and looked out the window. It was not an ordinary car. It was a police car. 2 officers got out. Officers. I could see their uniforms, the badges on their chests. Relief flooded through me so powerfully that I almost collapsed. They were here. They had come. I banged on the window with all the strength I had left. Help, I am up here. Help me. I could see one of the officers look up toward the house. He said something to his partner. Then they walked toward the front door. I heard the doorbell ring. My heart pounded. Please, please let them get me out of here. I heard the door open downstairs. I heard Brandon's voice, confused and defensive. Officers, what is this about? One of the officers responded, his voice firm and authoritative. We received a report that someone is being held against their will in this house. We need to come inside and check. Brandon stammered. What? No, that is ridiculous. That is just my mother. She is upstairs resting. Sir, we need to see her, the officer said. There was a pause. I could imagine Brandon's mind racing, trying to figure out what to do. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Multiple sets of footsteps. The officers were coming up. I moved to the door and pounded on it again. I am in here. He locked me in. Please help me. Ma'am, we are coming, a voice called out. A man's voice, calm and reassuring. Then I heard the officer speak to Brandon. Sir, open this door, now. Brandon's voice was panicked. I do not have the key. I do not know where it is. The officer's tone turned harder. Sir, open the door now, or we will break it down. There was a moment of silence. Then I heard the metallic sound of the lock turning. The door swung open. 2 police officers stood there, a man and a woman. Behind them I could see Brandon, his face pale and sweaty. The female officer stepped into the room quickly and came to me. Ma'am, are you all right? She asked, her voice gentle. I looked at her, and everything I had been holding inside came pouring out. He locked me in, I said, my voice cracking. He took my phone. I was having chest pain. I begged him to call 911. He would not. He wanted me to die so he could have his inheritance. The officer's face hardened. She turned to her partner. Call for an ambulance, now. The male officer pulled out his radio and spoke into it. Then he walked over to Brandon, who was standing in the hallway looking like he was about to faint. Sir, step aside. We need to talk to you downstairs. The female officer helped me to my feet. Can you walk? She asked. I nodded, though I was not sure I could. She put her arm around me, supporting my weight. We walked slowly out of the room, down the hallway toward the stairs. I saw Brandon standing there, his eyes wide. Mom, he said, his voice pleading. Mom, tell them it is a misunderstanding. I looked at him, this man who had once been my baby boy, and I felt nothing but disgust. I turned my face away and said nothing. The officers helped me down the stairs. By the time we reached the living room, I heard sirens outside. The ambulance had arrived. 2 paramedics came rushing in with a stretcher and equipment. They checked my blood pressure, my pulse, my oxygen levels. You are severely dehydrated, one of them said. We need to get you to the hospital right away. They lifted me onto the stretcher. I looked around the living room, the room where I had spent so many evenings with Gerald, where Brandon had played as a child. It felt like a different lifetime. As they wheeled me toward the door, I saw Dorothy running up the front walk, her face frantic with worry. Maddie, she cried. Oh my God, Maddie. She pushed past the officers and grabbed my hand. I got your email this morning. I called the police right away. I am so sorry it took so long. I squeezed her hand weakly. You saved my life, I whispered. Tears streamed down her face. I am coming with you to the hospital, she said, and she climbed into the ambulance beside me. As the ambulance pulled away, I looked back at the house. I saw the male officer putting handcuffs on Brandon. I heard the officer say, "You are under arrest for elder abuse and false imprisonment." Brandon was shouting something, but I could not hear the words. I did not want to. I closed my eyes and let the paramedics do their work. I was free. I had survived. And Brandon would now have to face what he had done. I spent 4 days in the hospital. The doctors treated me for dehydration, malnutrition, and dangerously high blood pressure. Dr. Susan Kowalski, a kind woman in her 50s, told me bluntly that I was lucky to be alive. A few more days without food, water, and medication, and you might not have made it, she said. Her words were sobering, but I already knew how close I had come. Dorothy visited me every single day. She brought me flowers, magazines, and homemade soup in a thermos. She sat by my bedside and held my hand. We talked for hours. She told me that after she saw my email Sunday morning, she immediately called the police and gave them my address. She also called my lawyer, Lawrence Carter, who had received the same email. He had also contacted the authorities. Between the two of them, they made sure help arrived quickly. "I could not believe it when I read your message," Dorothy said, shaking her head. "I thought maybe you had been hacked or something. But then I tried calling you, and your phone went straight to voicemail. I knew something was wrong." I squeezed her hand. "Thank you," I said. "You saved my life." She wiped tears from her eyes. "You are my best friend, Maddie. I would do anything for you." On the third day in the hospital, Lawrence Carter came to visit. He was a tall man in his 60s, always dressed in a neat suit and tie. He sat in the chair beside my bed and looked at me with deep concern. "Maddie, I am so sorry this happened to you," he said. "No one should ever have to go through what you went through." I nodded. "Thank you for calling the police." He waved a hand. "Of course. Now we need to talk about your estate and what you want to do moving forward." I had been thinking about this non-stop since I got to the hospital. My mind was clear now, my body recovering, and I knew exactly what I wanted. "I want to change my will immediately," I said, my voice firm. Lawrence pulled out a notepad. "All right, what changes would you like to make?" I took a deep breath. "Brandon will inherit nothing. Not the house, not the money, nothing. I want him completely removed from my will." Lawrence nodded without hesitation. "Understood. And who would you like to name as your beneficiaries?" I had thought about this carefully. "I want to divide everything 3 ways. 1/3 goes to Dorothy Palmer. She has been more family to me than my own son." Lawrence wrote that down. 1/3 goes to a charity called Safe Haven Foundation. They help victims of domestic violence and elder abuse." Lawrence nodded approvingly. "And the final third goes to Lincoln Elementary School, the school where I taught for 32 years. I want it set up as a scholarship fund for students in need." Lawrence looked up from his notes, a slight smile on his face. "That is very generous, Maddie. I think Gerald would be proud." Tears pricked at my eyes at the mention of my late husband. "I hope so," I whispered. Lawrence spent the next hour drafting the new will right there in the hospital room. Dorothy served as one witness, and a nurse named Carla served as the other. I signed the document with a shaking hand, but I felt a sense of peace as I did so. Brandon had tried to take everything from me, but in the end, he would get nothing. On my 4th day in the hospital, a nurse came into my room and told me I had a visitor. I assumed it was Dorothy again, but then Brandon walked in. My heart jumped into my throat. He looked terrible. His hair was greasy and uncombed. He had dark circles under his eyes. He was wearing the same clothes I had last seen him in. A security guard stood just outside the door, watching carefully. "Mom," Brandon said, his voice breaking. "Please, I need to talk to you." I wanted to tell him to leave, but part of me, some small, stubborn part, wanted to hear what he had to say. "You have 5 minutes," I said coldly. He stepped closer to the bed. "Mom, I am so sorry. I was not thinking straight. I was under so much pressure, so much stress. The debts, the money I owed, I just panicked. I did not know what to do." I stared at him. "You locked me in a room for 3 days, Brandon. You took my phone when I begged you to call for help. You left me without food or medicine. You wanted me to die." His face crumpled. "No, I did not. I needed time to think. I was scared. I was not trying to kill you, I swear." I shook my head slowly. "You were not scared, Brandon. You were greedy. You saw an opportunity to get what you wanted and you took it. You did not care if I lived or died." He dropped to his knees beside the bed, tears streaming down his face. "Please, Mom. I am your son. I made a terrible mistake, but I am still your son. Please forgive me." I looked down at him, this grown man crying like a child. and I felt nothing. No sympathy, no pity, no love, just emptiness. I changed my will, I said quietly. You will get nothing from me. Not the house, not the savings, nothing. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. What, Mom, you cannot do that. That is my inheritance. Dad wanted me to have it. I felt a flash of anger. Your father would be ashamed of you, and that money was never yours. It was mine to give, and I have chosen not to give it to you. Brandon stood up, his expression shifting from desperation to rage. You cannot do this to me. I am your only child. You owe me. I owe you nothing. I said, my voice like ice. You stopped being my son the moment you locked that door. Brandon opened his mouth to say something else, but the security guard stepped into the room. Sir, you need to leave now. Brandon looked at me one more time, his face twisted with anger and desperation. Then he turned and stormed out of the room. I watched him go, and I felt a strange sense of finality. That was the last conversation I would ever have with my son. Dorothy came back later that evening. I told her what had happened. She hugged me tightly. You did the right thing, Maddie, she said. He does not deserve your forgiveness. I nodded, but tears slipped down my cheeks anyway. Why does doing the right thing hurt so much? I asked. She stroked my hair gently. Because you are a good person. You loved him even when he did not deserve it. That is not a weakness. That is your strength. I was discharged from the hospital the next day. Dorothy drove me to her house. I could not go back to my own home yet. The thought of being in that house in that room made me feel sick. Dorothy insisted I stay with her for as long as I needed. Her house was small and cozy, just a 2-bedroom cottage in a quiet neighborhood. She gave me her guest room, which had a comfortable bed and a window that looked out onto a garden full of roses. For the next 2 weeks, Dorothy took care of me. She cooked meals, made sure I took my medication, and kept me company. We watched movies, played cards, and talked about everything except Brandon. I was grateful for her presence, for her unwavering support. She never once judged me or made me feel like a failure as a mother. She just loved me as a true friend does. 3 months later, Brandon's trial took place. I had to testify. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done. I sat in the witness stand in a courtroom full of strangers and told them what my son had done to me. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named District Attorney Patricia Nguyen, asked me detailed questions about those 3 days. I answered every one, my voice steady, even though my hands were shaking. Brandon's lawyer, a man named Attorney Franklin Hayes, tried to make excuses for him. He said Brandon was under immense financial pressure. He said Brandon had mental health issues. He said it was all a terrible misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming. The emails I had sent from the iPad, the testimony of the police officers who had found me, the medical report from Dr. Kowalski describing my condition when I was admitted to the hospital. It was all there, clear and undeniable. The judge, an older man named Judge Howard Brennan, listened to everything with a stern expression. When it was time for him to deliver the sentence, he looked directly at Brandon and said, "Mr. Brandon Whitmore, you betrayed the trust of the person who loved you most in this world. You endangered your mother's life for your own financial gain. This court finds you guilty of elder abuse and false imprisonment." The sentence was 5 years in prison. Additionally, Judge Brennan issued a restraining order that prevented Brandon from contacting me for 10 years after his release. Brandon sat at the defendant's table, his head in his hands. He did not look at me. Not once. I sat in the gallery with Dorothy beside me, and I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Justice had been served, but it did not erase what had happened. It did not bring back the son I thought I had. After the trial, I made a decision. I could not live in that house anymore. Too many memories, too much pain. I put it on the market, and it sold quickly for $840,000. With that money, I bought a small 2-bedroom house in a different part of Portland closer to Dorothy. It was a charming little place, with a front porch and a backyard just big enough for a garden. I painted the walls in soft colors, bought new furniture, and filled the rooms with things that made me happy: books, plants, photographs of Gerald, and the life we had built together. There were no pictures of Brandon. I also threw myself into volunteer work. I reached out to the Safe Haven Foundation and offered to speak at their events. I told my story to groups of people, hoping that it might help someone else recognize the signs of elder abuse, hoping that it might give someone else the courage to speak up. It was difficult at first, reliving those 3 days over and over again, but it also felt meaningful. My pain had a purpose now. One afternoon, about 6 months after the trial, I was speaking at a community center. After my talk, an elderly woman came up to me. Her name was Gloria Martin, and she was 72 years old. She had tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "My daughter has been taking money from me for years. She controls everything I do." I thought I was alone. But after hearing your story, I realize I do not have to accept this. I can get help. I hugged her tightly. "You are not alone," I told her. "And you deserve better." She nodded, wiping her eyes. We exchanged phone numbers, and I connected her with resources at Safe Haven. A few weeks later, she called to tell me she had gotten a lawyer and was taking steps to protect herself. Hearing that gave me more peace than anything else had. My suffering had not been in vain. Dorothy and I grew even closer during this time. We were like sisters now. We went on trips together, visiting places we had always wanted to see. We drove to the Grand Canyon and stood at the edge, marveling at the vastness of it all. We went to Yellowstone and watched geysers erupt under a clear blue sky. We laughed, we cried, we supported each other. Dorothy joked one day, "We are like Thelma and Louise, but smarter." I laughed. And with better life insurance, I updated my will again to reflect my new life. Dorothy would inherit $200,000 along with any personal belongings she wanted. The rest would still go to Safe Haven Foundation and Lincoln Elementary School. Dorothy was deeply moved when I told her. "Maddie, you do not have to do that," she said. I took her hands in mine. "You saved my life, Dorothy. You have been the family I needed. You deserve it." One day, about a year after Brandon was sentenced, I received a letter in the mail. It was from him, sent from the prison. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Part of me did not want to read it, but another part, a small part, was curious. I opened it carefully. The letter was written in Brandon's handwriting, messy and uneven. It said, "Mom, I know I do not deserve your forgiveness. I destroyed everything. I hurt you in a way that can never be undone. I think about what I did every single day. I am sorry. I am so, so sorry. I do not expect you to write back. I just needed you to know." I read the letter twice. Then I folded it up, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in a box in my closet. I did not respond. I did not know if I ever would. Maybe one day I would find it in my heart to forgive him, but that day was not today. And maybe it never would be. And I had made peace with that. It has been 2 years now since that terrible night. I am 69 years old. I live in my small house with the garden full of lavender and roses. Every morning I wake up to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. I make myself a cup of tea and sit on my front porch, watching the world come to life. I see my neighbors walking their dogs, children riding bikes, birds singing in the trees. It is a simple life, but it is mine, and it is peaceful. Dorothy comes over at least twice a week. We cook dinner together, watch old movies, and talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes we sit in comfortable silence, and that is okay too. She has become the family I chose, the sister I never had. I am grateful for her every single day. I continue my work with Safe Haven Foundation. I speak at events, I mentor other survivors of elder abuse, and I help raise funds for the organization. It gives me purpose. It reminds me that even in the darkest moments, there is always a way forward. I have met so many incredible people through this work, people who have survived unimaginable pain and come out stronger on the other side. They inspire me. I think about Gerald often. I talk to him sometimes late at night when the house is quiet. I tell him about my day, about the garden, about Dorothy. I tell him I am okay. I think he would be proud of me for surviving, for fighting back, for not giving up. I miss him every day, but the grief is softer now, less sharp. It has become a part of me, woven into who I am. As for Brandon, I do not know how he is doing, and I do not ask. He will be released from prison in a few years. I do not know what he will do then or where he will go. I do know that he will not come back to me. The restraining order ensures that, but even without it, I think he understands that the door between us is closed. Perhaps someday, many years from now, when I am much older and closer to the end of my life, I will think of him and feel something other than pain. Perhaps I will remember the little boy who used to hold my hand, who used to laugh at my jokes, who used to say he loved me. But for now, I am content to let him go. I have learned so much in these past 2 years. I have learned that love does not guarantee loyalty. I have learned that giving everything to someone does not mean they will give anything back. I have learned that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we trusted the deepest. But I have also learned that surviving betrayal does not mean becoming bitter. It means becoming wiser. It means choosing yourself, choosing peace, choosing to move forward. There are mornings when I still think about those 3 days locked in that room. I remember the fear, the hunger, the desperation. But I also remember the strength I found in myself. I remember the moment I decided I would not give up. I remember opening that iPad and sending those emails, taking control of my own survival. That moment changed me. It showed me that even at 68 years old, I am stronger than I ever knew. I am proud of the life I have built since then. It is not the life I imagined when I was young, when Gerald and I were raising Brandon and dreaming of the future. But it is a good life. It is a life filled with friendship, purpose, and peace. I wake up every morning grateful to be alive, grateful for my health, my home, my garden, and my freedom. That is more than enough. That is everything. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved and trusted? Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to walk away from a family member for your own well-being? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is going through something similar. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that no matter how dark things get, there is always a way forward. Stay strong, take care of yourselves, and remember that you are worth fighting for. May you find peace, courage, and the strength to choose yourself when you need to most.